Okay, so first of all, I'll show it to you. So it's a standard Angular CLI application. So what I'm going to do here is do an ng-serve. What that'll do is it'll take my Angular CLI application and it'll compile all of the TypeScript, including some linting. We'll come to that later, and it will serve it up on a development server so that you can see it from the front end. I've also got a back end. So it's a JSON backend, and it is using a thing called JSON server to serve up a simple RESTful interface that we can use in the application. So this stuff's not really super interesting or relevant. I just wanted to show it to you so you know it's not magic juju. So it's now serving on localhost 4200. We should be able to go to that. You're getting a sneak preview there of what you'll get to in a minute. And while that's loading, I'll start to show you the code. So an Angular 2 application, for all the people who are doing Angular 1 and people who are new to Angular 2, Angular 2 applications don't look like Angular 1 applications really at all. So the most interesting thing, I guess, about this application is the notes component. So what you're seeing, so have I got it yet? There it is. So this is the application. So at the moment, this application doesn't do much. It's a single note on a page, and obviously the intent of the buttons is for you to add a new note of that particular color. You guys can guess that. And obviously we want to be able to change the data in the note, and an interesting thing about this demo, the note is also draggable. So I want to track both the text of the note and I want to track the position of the note, and ultimately I want to store that data in a database, right? At the moment it doesn't do any of that. It's a very simple example, and what I've done with the code base is I've frozen snapshots. I've used Git releases, so you can actually get the full source code of this application and you can step through the different points, and you'll actually see me flipping it as we talk. So this is the first iteration. So this is an Angular 2 application. It is using, this is the notes component. The notes component is included by the app component. That's the app component. So Angular 2 is all about components. I know React is all about components too, right? So you're seeing here an app component which contains an app notes component, and then the notes component which in turn contains an app note component. So notes, so app, notes, note. At the moment I've only got a single note, and you can see I have manually set the properties. I've set the text color left top properties. I've also set the disable property, which at the moment is false. And I've got a couple of event handlers. So the notes spits out an event that says change note text and change note position. So all I'm doing at the moment in the notes component code, so this is, is that actually too big? Can you still see that? Or is that okay? Just to get more on. So this is the notes component. So it's an Angular 2 component, so you can see that its selector is app notes. And obviously that's what you get there. The selector is app notes. It's got a template URL, which is not super interesting. It's got a style information, which is not interesting either. And it's got the note component as a directive and the add button component as a directive. And then obviously it renders those onto the page. So I don't want to do like an Angular 2 how-to. I know a lot of people are interested, but I really want to talk about some state management and get state into this application. So you can see what I'm doing with the events. All I'm currently doing is logging those to the console. So no data. All I'm doing is, and you can see obviously in the console, if I add a note, it doesn't work yet, but you can see the intent is that I'll add a blue note. Okay? Awesome. So what we will do, so obviously the crude thing about this application is that at the moment the notes component just has a single note. So obviously I want to have a list of notes. Now you all know what's going to happen next, right? So what you would do in Angular 1 is you would have a controller, and the controller would have an array of notes, and then you would bind that to the template using the binding syntax, and that's what we'll do. So this is not magic, this is me moving the code base forward to the next version. All right, and what should happen, magic, what should happen is that the Angular CLI will compile that and serve it, and you can see it's now the new application. So, all right, so what's changed? So instead of manually setting the text, we're now setting the text from this note object. And that note object is coming from a collection of notes. And you can see this is same as ng repeat. Right? So I'm doing ng for let note of notes. You would have seen an earlier syntax with a hash. That's now deprecated, RC2, etc. So we now say let note of notes. Notes is now an array of notes that is on the notes component. Okay, so this is the component managing its own state in a simple JavaScript array. Simple, right? Add note does this.notes.push. Simple. On change note text, spins through the notes, and then if it finds the note that it's looking for, it changes or mutates the note text. Who's talked about pure functions and immutable state? Are you uncomfortable right now? No? This is horrible, right? I shouldn't be mutating the state. This is not where we'll finish. Okay? So this is me mutating the state in the notes array. Similarly, when I change the note position, I spin through the notes and I change the left and top properties on the note that it has found. And I'm still just console logging on it. Okay, so that's sort of step one. So now I've got now this notes component has its own state in a JavaScript array, and it's managing that state through method calls, right? Simple, but not very scalable, right? The problem with this approach is, number one, I'm not talking to a database. Number two, I'm mutating my own state. Number three, that state's only available to the note component. It's not available to any other elements that I might want to have on that page. I might want to have a summary of notes by color. I might want to have a count of notes by color. I might want to have a number of other things on the page that have access to that state. But at the moment they can't because the state's locked up in the component, right? So this is almost an anti-pattern. But it does work. So I can add a note and I can move it around, and you can see that what I've done here is just for your viewing pleasure, I'm spitting the notes out as JSON so that you can see the state change. So you can see here, I've now added a text color, green, left, top, and then as I move it, that will move and I can add another one. All right, so it works, but it's not architecturally very good. All right, so let's go to the next step. All right, so this is kind of a big step, right? So this is kind of going to blow your mind a little bit, right? So what I wanted to do was I wanted the notes component to no longer manage its own state, yeah? So I wanted to delegate the management of the note state to something else. So what I did, so if we have a look at the notes component now, and I've got this will blow your mind, but I've got a picture. So the notes component now has an observable of an array of notes. I'm seeing some nods and I'm seeing some blank, okay? So what's an observable? I don't want to do the whole observable talk, right? What's an observable? An observable is a handle to a stream of values that will change over time, right? It's similar to a future in Java. It's similar to a promise, except you get multiple values. You can also cancel the observable, whereas a promise you can't cancel. And you can, actually that's it. So you get multiple values over time and you can cancel. And they're sexier because they're new, right? Anyway. All right, so I've now got an observable of an array of notes. Now I have a picture for the people who still don't understand what I'm talking about. This is my picture of my notes observable. Over time, I'm getting... So my first set of array of notes that I get has only got one. If I say add a new note, then the next snapshot, the next array of notes that I get from my observable will have two. So my component doesn't know how the second one got in there. It just knows that it's getting a second stream, a second item in the stream, which has now got two items in the array. Okay, an observable of an array of notes. All right, and how did I get that done? So I delegated the state management to a new thing that I've introduced, which is a notes service. I'm also delegating all of the mutation of the state to the notes service by saying, for example, this.noteservice.addNote. Okay, I've delegated out, so I've refactored it out into a service component. In the constructor, I am injecting the notes service. The notes service is now provided, and the $notes is being set from a method call on the notes service called getNotes. So we've got to dig into that now, don't we? Because you need to know what's in there. All right. This is something that you will never ever do. I've actually implemented my own observable in the service, right? So we'll get past this. You won't have to do this, but I just think this is interesting, right? So what I've done is I've created a subject of array of notes. The notes service is currently, there's that array again, right? So the notes service is now managing the state for you. And then when it changes, for example, if you change the note text, this is a method on the notes service. It is spinning through the notes. It's finding the note that it wants to change, and then it's changing the text of that note, and then it's saying this.notesource.next, this.notes. So it's punching out that next array of notes through the observable handle. Okay? All right. Who thinks this is clumsy and horrible? Thank you. This is awful, right? You don't want to have to do this for every service, right? The other thing that's horrible about it is with regard to a mutable state. I'm still mutating the state, okay? This is bad, okay? Mutation is bad, all right? So let's just, I think the next one just takes out that state mutation. All right. So who's with me so far? Who's not with me? Okay. Okay. Maybe you can get the source and you can look at every step, and the video will also be up on YouTube. Okay? All right. So what I've done here is I've changed the note service methods now so that they no longer mutate the state. So yeah, yes, that's TypeScript getting upset with me. It does work though. All right. So what is this? Okay. So now when I add a note, instead of spinning through the array, finding the note, and then, or instead of pushing a note to the notes array, if I just push a note into the notes array, then I've got the same notes array handle, but it's now got more items. I've mutated that array. That's bad. What I've done here instead is I said this.notes equals, and this is the ES6 or TypeScript, depending on which way you fall. This is the spread operator, right? It's an ES6 operator. What that's saying is create a new array. The first thing you want to put in that is all of the items from the notes array, right? It's the spread. The spread operator takes the items in the array, turns them into individual items, and then adds them to the array. You can also use the spread operator for things like method calls where you've got a variable number of operands, that sort of thing. And then what I'm doing is I'm adding to that the new note instance, right? So create a new array, put all of the items from the original array in it, and then add another note to the end of the array. So what that means is that this.notes is now a new reference. It's a new object, or a new object reference. Okay, I haven't mutated the original. If you looked at the original reference, you would still get the same array. You've got now a new reference, so it's now immutable. I've now rendered it immutable. Okay, I haven't used immutable JS, etc. I've just done it this way.
Out of curiosity, is that feature part of ECMAScript 2015 or just?
It's ES6. Yeah, 2015. Yeah, the spread operator. Yeah. And it's supported by TypeScript. So this is all TypeScript compilation.
Do you have an ID on the node? It seems to be complaining about every single ID there. Do you have an ID property on the node definition?
Yes, I have added that. So so this is another TypeScript feature. So JavaScript doesn't have classes, it doesn't have interfaces. ES6 has classes and interfaces, or TypeScript has interfaces. ES6 doesn't have interfaces.
Is there like an enum?
Say again?
Enum?
No.
It's not like an enum. It's kind of like an interface, but it compiles out. So in the JavaScript, there's nothing. It just ensures that the JavaScript objects that you stick into a note reference have these properties, and then it compiles completely away when it goes to ES5. And yes, it does have an ID, which is a string. Why it's compiling, right? So I don't know what the squiggle is about. Can we just ignore it? All right. So note service, note.map, and okay. So how do I? If I'm changing the note, this is easier. If I'm changing the note text, how do I do that? Right. That's the original note. So I still spin through the list, but what I'm doing is I'm doing a this.notes.map. Now that's an array method that takes every note and gives you a new array with the return of the map function. If it's the note ID that I'm interested in, so I've now changed from reference equality because now it's immutable. I don't want to be using reference equality, it feels wrong, right? So I have to introduce an ID, and now I'm using ID equality. I say object assign, start with an empty object, add all of the properties from the original note and their values, and then add or mute or change the text property to whatever is the text. This is also idempotent, so if there wasn't a text property, it will add a text property. So this object assign is effectively creating a new note object, starting with a blank object, and then adding all of the properties from the original and the changed text.
Which is equal that you create a new property. It doesn't exist.
Correct, it's idempotent, yeah. So I could, and actually, so go again? How do you TypeScript that? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. But text is a property that's on the note model, so that's okay. It's an interesting one, but in this case, I'm actually changing a property that's already defined on that property, so it's not hurting me. But it's an interesting point you make. If you added a property, you would hope the TypeScript compiler would complain, and I think that it would. So if I don't really have time to play with it, but we can look at it up. All right, so all I've done here, so the notes component is still delegating to the notes service. It still has a notes observable, and the notes service is still doing all of the state management with its own array of notes, but it's now immutable. Okay, let's go. Next one. Who's still with me?
Instead of using the if statement, could you use the filter?
Could I use a filter?
No, because it's still an array of the same size.
No, because you need to add the other note.
Yeah, no, it's a map operation. Filter takes an array or an observable. Filter is on map and filter on arrays and observables, right? Filter gives you the same objects, but potentially less of them. You filter out objects rather than changing an object. We want the same number. To someone else said it. We want the same number of notes, just one changed. All right. All right. The keen-eyed of you have noticed that there are now reducers, so we've now introduced NGRX store. All right. I have some more slides. If you asked me a month ago or 2 months ago, what is NGRX store about and what is reactive about, I just would have said this. It's something about one-way data flow, right? Pretty cool, right? Okay, so a little bit more realistic than that. It is about one-way data flow, kind of. All right. Who does React? Who does React? Someone? Someone said. They're not pressing up. Okay. This is the controller. He's part of the MVC model, right? He's been around for decades. He's just cruising. He's saying, no one's going to replace me anytime soon, right? The Facebook team came along and they said, we've got this thing called React. Yeah. It's all about the UI being a pure function of state. And if you want to mutate state, mutation is bad. Flux is a pattern. It's a one-way data flow pattern. I'm not going to show the picture. You've probably all seen it. I'm showing another picture. Flux was a pattern. It was an implementation. It was in the React community. It's not a thing you can pick up and use. In the React community, there ensued a war of different implementations of Flux, right? It was a bloody battle. Redux won the Flux wars. Okay, so in the React community, last time I checked in with those guys, right, Redux was winning the war, right? If you wanted to do a Flux implementation, you use Redux. Dan Abramov, he's a great speaker, much better than me, and he does Redux, and it's pretty cool. And you've got to watch the egghead video from Dan Abramov on Redux. It's fantastic. Okay. It is really good, and it is free. They are nagging you now, but it is still free. Okay, Rob Wormold from the Angular team. He looked at Redux and he said, oh, you know, you look tasty, right? I really like you, but I also like observables, right? We already know about observables because we're pro, right? Right, we just did it. So Rob Wormold did a Redux implementation leveraging observables, and he called it NGRX Store, okay? He could have called it Redux, Angular Redux. He could have called it all sorts of things. He called it NGRX Store. NGRX Store is an implementation of the more or less of the Flux pattern. It's a rip-off of Redux, but it uses observables. That's what it is. Okay, and you can use it in Angular too, and it's super cool. This is what I'm going for. NGRX Store is the thing that will manage the state. It will manage one state tree for the whole application. Okay? You no longer mutate the state directly. Instead of mutating the state directly, you dispatch an action to the store. The store will determine how the state should change based on your action. It's a separation. It's an architectural separation, right? The way it affects, the way it makes that state change based on your action is it delegates that job to a chain of functions called reducers. Reducers are pure functions which take state and an action and give you back a new state with a mutable, in an immutable way, right? So NGRX Store has taken on all of the state management for you, and it's delegated all of the actual mutation of state to a set of functions that you write called reducers. And then what you have to do from your application, you dispatch actions to the store and you write the reducers, and store is like a middleware that manages the state for you. NGRX Store gives you your state back as an observable handle. And now this is a little bit controversial. You can use the store directly in your component. I have chosen to keep the service in between, right? So I'm still calling methods on the service. The service is passing that observable handle back to this component. This is my notes component. Who's heard about smart and dumb components? Excellent, right? So a smart component has knowledge of state. A dumb component is just a presentational component. You just set properties on it and it renders a display, right? Our note component is a dumb component. It doesn't know anything about the database or the store. The notes component is a smart component. It's going to be wired in, okay? That's what I'm shooting for, okay? Oh, that's next. Guys, I've got a lot of material. I am sorry, but I just wanted to blow your minds, right? So, all right. So I'm importing the store.
And you got 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Ooh. Okay. So the notes component now has a store object, which is a store of app state. App state now has So app state, now what you generally do in your app state is you have the full tree of all of the state that your whole application is interested. You might have notes, you might have users, you might have all sorts of different stuff. My tree has just got notes in it at the moment because it's a simple application. So the app state has a notes property, which is an array of note. the notes component. The notes component is still got this notes property, which is still an observable array of notes. So the notes component, the rendering part of it, hasn't changed at all. This is still exactly the same. The notes component's got an observable array of notes. It's still using the notes service. It's still saying get notes on the notes service. So all of the actions now happening in the notes service. The notes service now has a handle to the store, which is injected in the constructor. I'll show you that wiring in a second. The notes service is, instead of mutating its own state and telling you about it through the observable, it's now dispatching an action to the store. So if I add a note, the service is now dispatching an action to the store which says add note, and here is my payload. Okay? And then it gets that observable handle by slicing off the section of the state tree that it's interested in by saying this.store.select notes. And it happens to be of type array of note. Does that make sense? Okay, so now the service is now delegating all of the state management to the store. So the service isn't really doing much anymore, but in a second it'll do a bit more. I don't have much time. All right, so it's still not doing anything there. I have introduced reducers. So the reducers are the functions that NGRX store will use to change the state using the action. You can see this is a pure function of an array of note and an action, and all it is doing is returning a new notes. It's still using the spread operator for add. It's delegating the update. It's doing a notes.map. It's delegating to, this is what we call the root reducer. It's delegating that work to a note reducer, which does the reduction of the note itself. You can see the add notes doing that same object assign using the pay, so it's just adding the payload. And when you're doing an update, it's still doing the check on the note ID, and it's doing an object assign, so that's the code we've already seen. It's just doing it in the reducer function. So this reducer function is now a pure function of state. It doesn't do any mutation. And the way we wire that all in and together is in my main. So this is the main method for your Angular 2 application. Who has done an Angular 2 application and knows what the main method is? Some. So the if you're doing Angular 1 and you manually bootstrap your Angular 1 application, this might make a little bit of sense. But what you're doing here is you're bootstrapping the app component, and you're also using this provide store. You're telling it that the notes reducer is responsible for the notes property on the app state, and you're giving it a default state. So you're having a starting point of nothing. All right, and so that's how in the notes service, that's how the store gets injected successfully into the constructor. Okay, because you provided it, and then to the dependency injection system, and it's available for injection. All right. Oh, I don't have much time. I'll keep going. I'll stop asking the question. All right, version 6. Where's the database, Michael? Well, okay. This version introduces a notes data service. The notes data service is who's done a DAO? Everyone's probably done a DAO. The notes data service is a simple abstraction layer over HTTP. It has a getNotes method, which again returns an observable of an array of notes. But in this case, it's doing an HTTP get. It's going to the API root, and it's returning notes. And I'll just show you quickly. It's getting that. Okay, that's my backend is providing an array of notes on that endpoint, and that is abstracted to the getNotes method on the notes data service. It's also got this add or update note method, which does an HTTP post to the notes endpoint of the note that you pass in, and it's getting the response back. So that's the notes data service. The notes service is now having the notes data service injected. The reducer has changed slightly. The note reducer, to your point, I have had to add here. So dirty is a new property on the note. Yeah, I've had to add that to the model. So what this is effectively saying is when you change the note, even though you've changed it in the state, it's now out of sync with the database. Yeah. So when you've finished doing your store dispatch, you know, do the sync to server. Sync to server. This is interesting. The sync to server method is just another subscriber to that notes observable. Every time you get a new set of notes, you spin through them and you say, if it's dirty, go ahead and call the notes data service to add or update note, subscribe to the response, and then dispatch another action to the store that says update note from server. So for instance, if anything's changed from the server, like you get an ID from the server or you get, say, a modified date time from the server, that action would give you that change. So here I'm updating the note from the server, and again, the only difference here is that I'm saying dirty equals false. Okay, so now what I've done is I've wired in the database. So now what you should see here is this is now showing the notes from the database, and when I change them, you can see down the bottom here, you can see that the left has changed. And did you notice that it's disabled? So what I'm doing is if the note is dirty, I'm now wiring it in such that it disables the note if it's dirty. Disabled equals note.dirty. So what that's effectively doing now is it's changing the state locally first, and then it's synchronizing it with the server. When the server says it's updated, it's changing the note again to say you're no longer dirty, and that's reflected in the user interface, right? So what you get effectively is the ability to change the user interface in a sort of responsive way, and the updates to the server happen in the background. Okay. All right. So I've really run out of time, I think. And 5 minutes? Okay. So who thinks that's awful? Should be everyone, right? That's horrible. All right. This in particular is horrible, right? Yeah. So now what I've got is effectively a note service saying once you finish mutating the state, go and do this extra thing, right? Which is a side effect, if you like. It's a side effect of the action. And when you finish doing that, then dispatch another event to the store to mutate the state again. That's horrible, right? It is. It's awful. And you don't want to do this every time you do it. So that's where you need NGRX effects. So I was going to do another fish diagram, but there's a thing called Redux. We talked about Redux already. If you want to delay a Redux action until you've done an asynchronous request, it's called a Redux thunk. Who's done a Redux thunk? And then they made it more complicated again, and they said, let's do a thing called Redux Saga, where you've got this complicated interaction between HTTP and the store. And then Rob Wormald came along and he said, oh, Redux Saga, you look cool. I'm going to implement you myself with observables, and he called that NGRX effects. Okay, so NGRX effects is exactly like React Sagas, except it's done with Angular and TypeScript, and it uses observables. So this is what I'm trying to do with the NGRX effects. You've still got the store. What happens is you pass the state and the action to the effects. I've again interspersed a service here. That's got a bunch of effects functions. The effects service will now call the data service. It will get the response from HTTP, and then it will dispatch another action. And so that whole post thing with the dirty and the sending the asynchronous response and sending it back to not dirty again, it's all delegated out to this effects service. That's the best I can explain it. Last one. So, the note service. Look how clean it is now. All the note service is now doing is getting the store, it's dispatching actions to the store. In my wiring now, in addition to wiring in the provide store, I also have to wire in this run effects, right? I say run effects and I give it the notes effects service. So the notes effects service is the new service responsible for this back-end synchronization. The notes effects service, I'm sorry, this is pretty full on. So the notes effects service is saying, there we go, we used filter. So, but only to filter out what isn't dirty. Yeah? Yeah, because I'm not interested in mutating the ones that aren't dirty. So what this is saying is, first of all, effects gives you an observable of updates now. So you can now respond to an observable of updates, a stream of updates. In response to that stream of updates, you're saying, it's like a filter, you're saying, if the action on that update is update text, note position or add note, map the update into, so grab the notes state out of the update, that's just sort of for convenience. Take the array of notes and turn that into an observable of single notes. That's what the observable from is doing. That's actually taking the array of notes and turning it into an observable of the items. Merge map that so that it comes in, filtering out the dirty ones, switch mapping, and then it's still doing the add or update note on the notes data service. So we've come full circle. So we've now got this. So the service is doing very little. The effects service is doing all of the synchronization with HTTP, and the store and the reducers are doing all of the mutation of local state. And this, as far as I can tell, is kind of the latest way to do state and data management in Angular 2. And that's where I'll finish, and I'll let you guys go. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Two quick questions. Anybody has questions? Yep.
Where I can learn all of this, so one day I can write these things.
So I will post some links.
Yeah.
You've got to watch the Egghead talk from Dan Abramov on the store on Redux. It's really, really good. Observables, I'll send you some links to some videos from Rob Wormold from the Angular team. He's responsible for NGRX effects and store, and they're also doing an NGRX router because browser state's just state, right? So anyway, they're doing a router as well. I'll send you some videos from Rob Wormold. He does a standard one where he explains why observables are cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There was another question this side, right? Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, if you change the text on something, how many times is it going to re-render?
You're talking about change detection?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we refactored everything so that the notes state only changes when you've got an observable, when it pushes a new value, you can tell Angular 2 to only re-render when it gets an observable event. And we did that, actually I did skip it. So what I've done there is I've said the change detection strategy for this user interface component is on push. So it'll only render it when you update the note. I see what you mean though. If you drag it and then stop it, is it going to re-render when it updates? Yes.
Yeah. Like,
So your user interface has to be a function of the state, right? Which is why in the note component, it's got all of those properties, right? So I don't mutate anything in the state that isn't, if you get it wrong, it does look weird. You drag it and then some seconds later it'll drag back. Yeah, so it has to be a function of the state. So in answer to your question, you move it once, you're changing the DOM properties, then you're changing the state, and then it will re-render when it changes the state. Yeah, into the same spot, hopefully, right?
Cool. So
I think that's
everything we have time for.
I'll come back to you. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah.
All right.
Thank
Thank you.